Mr. Nunn is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Chairman Powell, for being with us today. Your office has done a very diligent job in working with this body on both sides of the aisle. I chalk some of that up to the fact that you've got some very good folks from Iowa on your staff there helping keep the trains running on time, so that's excellent. I will note that, in Iowa, the average family has experienced, annual inflation of about $925 per month just in the last 3 years. I've got 6 kids. We're the #1 egg producing state in the country, but yet eggs for each one of my kids goes up 40% this past year, and take that times 6. I'm no economist, but that adds up real quick, and I think I'm reflective of a lot of families across the country right now. So, Mr. Chair, one of the things I'd like to talk about is what we are focused on and what your department's working on at the Fed. The U.S. Federal Reserve, in my opinion, should be more focused on folks like my hometown of Bondurant, Iowa, versus what's coming out of elected bureaucrats in Brussels, Belgium, for example. Which is one of the reasons I'm so grateful that you have talked about reopening Basel III for a conversation on what's in the best interest of the American people. I applaud you and your team for this. While I would like to see Basel III candidly scrapped altogether, I think that there are 3 things in this proposal that we've got to look at immediately. 1, the impact of credit availability, especially to ensure that it won't be tighter credit conditions on small businesses back home in places like Iowa. The ability for farmers across the country to be able to hedge their grain, corn, soybean, livestock in a new Basel III conversation, and ultimately eliminate the downstream effects on American banks being held to higher standards and very clear in Basel III than what's being held in Europe. So with that, I want to readdress your team's attention to the letter I sent in a bipartisan way with Senator Jerry Moran, specifically emphasizing the negative impact of increased bank capital requirements on the economy, our constituents, and ultimately our ag producers across the country. So what I'll first say is, can you confirm that the next Basel III proposal as outlined will address concerns from our ag growers, including our farmers?
Let me just say that we're well aware of the concerns you're raising about hedging, and I'm not going to be too specific about things, but we're quite aware of those concerns.
I certainly hope your team gets the opportunity to hear that, because it's one of the most painful things I'm hearing back in my home district. Would you agree that the end user's concerns could have been mitigated maybe at the front end of this if, Congress or, say, a farmer in my district had been included in those opening conversations?
In hindsight, perhaps that's right. But in any case, this is what the comment period is for.
Well, I'll note that 84% of the comments coming from this proposal concern entities outside of banks, as you know. A lot of those were from the ag industry who felt that they had no voice in this and were a recipient of things that really harm their businesses. With that, I want to read quickly, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers was asked about Basel, and he said, quote, "We're going to need to prepare for consolidation in banking in the future, quite possibly some even further evolution of lending away from banks." Now, I'm going to note here that Iowa has over 250 community banks with assets under $7 billion. His comments are of great concern on this consolidation. Do you share concerns about a consolidation amongst banks across America?
So, I speak for myself. I realize that community banks are tremendously important in their communities, and it's not a better world when community banks go out of business. Or at the same time, if there needs to be consolidation, I don't think we should be standing in the way of that. But we shouldn't. We don't want to be part of the reason why community banks are going out of business or being forced to merge because of, for example, high fixed costs because of regulation or other things.
I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman. We don't want to be the instigator for a small bank to have to go out and stop serving the local community. As we look at Basel III, if it's finalized in early 2025, does that mean we will push implementation back to 2026?
I don't know exactly what it would be, but that's something like that is right. We'd have a typical phase-in process at the end of the, quite a lot of work to do to get to a final rule, and then there'll be a phase-in process. I don't know exactly what the date would be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to know kind of a timeline for my folks. I mean, there's obviously 2026, or take my advice, scrap it all together and we can start over, if we even need to do that. Let me ask very quickly, with Chevron overturned, is there anything the Fed is doing to identify areas where maybe we have over-regulated at the federal side and you're self-policing right now?
Under the Chevron decision? I mean, again, our view is we're very focused on obeying the law and reading the actual words of the law and interpreting it according to the words that are in the law. This is the way we approach things, and I'm not sure how much will change. Basically a court will be doing that with a little bit less deference to the agency, but we think we're already interpreting the law pretty carefully. So, and again, these are brand new decisions. There are several of them, and it's way early. We're just studying.
Basel III, Federal Reserve. Go type that into Google and learn about it. Basel III is internationally kind of like the International Monetary Foundation, kind of like the G5 leaders, kind of like the people who get together every year at Davos, kind of like the people who say you're going to own nothing and be happy about it, agreed to set measures developed by the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision in response to the financial crisis in 07 through 09. Oh gee, we're back to the going broke in 08 thing. Basel III Endgame is assessing the bigger picture. While there'll be a broad and material changes in the rules before the final one that it goes on to talk about here, making it potentially consequential for U.S. banking regulations since the 2010 passage of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. What is the Dodd-Frank Act? What does the Dodd-Frank Act do? President Obama's Wall Street reform created an independent agency to set and enforce clear, consistent rules for the financial marketplace. The Consumer Financial Protection is a clear rules of the road and ensure the financial terms of standards. What does the Dodd-Frank law protect against? The Dodd-Frank Act prohibits general prohibition against banks and their affiliates owning equity interests in hedge funds and private equity companies. This law was after the Glass-Steagall Act, which basically separated the definition between a bank, a hedge fund group, etc. Then what happens? Here comes good old Donald Trump and absolutely destroys the Dodd-Frank law, allowing the banks to go run amok and do whatever the hell they want. Basel III regulatory overhaul implemented by the Fed, designed by the scumbags, reduced competition. The increased capital requirements could reduce the number of products and services offered by large banks, which would lead to a reduced competition. Well, there you go. The first step to a digital dollar, just not have a local bank. Banks may reduce activities or withdrawals from providing some of the products or services, including hedging for farmers. This could lead to higher trading and hedging costs and lower liquidity. Basel III could make it more expensive or less available for the farmers to use financial agreements called derivatives to hedge against price risks. Make it more difficult for farmers to access credit and manage risk. Well, that's wonderful. That means your operating note's going to go down the fucking toilet. Sell now. That way, some big outfit like Bunge or Cargill can make sure that they place it on their books, hold this stuff, and then do whatever the fuck they feel like, because that's the ultimate true way of a bank or any scumbag tactic, is to protect the very biggest and the very largest. Fuck the small guy. Just so you don't think I'm bullshitting you. Bank think Basel III will drive up the cost for farming. Goes on down here to articles. So you know about bad weather, blah, blah, blah. So basically when the market gets high, for that farm reason, farmers and ranchers have used derivatives. Let's go over here to the definition of derivatives. Derivatives are a financial contract of the value performance of the underlying asset. There you go. Borrow against your land or equipment or whatever you got. Then hedge. So get an operating note and then go hedge it. So it's easier to borrow my operating note now than get higher grain prices later. Well, let's make sure we just immediately get rid of that. Basel III Endgame will drive up costs for farmers. What they're trying to do is they're just, at least in my opinion, they're trying to get rid of blowing up balance sheets. Land is collateral. You borrow against your collateral, which means the bank has to add it to their balance sheet. And there has to be a protection in there, so the bank obviously wants the asset to grow, and you use that to hedge maybe commodities. So maybe you don't want to sell grain right now, you just put your bills in your operating note and you sell the grain at a higher price later. Well, that's essentially what they're trying to get rid of. And they claim in some articles that it's to end world hunger. Others argue that it will actually drive up the cost of farming. My guess is the Federal Reserve's trying to shed mortgage-backed securities, trying to get some of their balance sheets down even further. So if you're denied an operating note, it's probably coming from the top. And obviously just market conditions. But that scumbag that was in there on the first video, it's Zach Nunn from Iowa. Real asshole, but just something to be aware of. I don't know a single other farm channel bringing this to anybody's attention. How will Basel III affect the banks in the United States? Basel III's minimum capital requirements for banks. In other words, they want banks to hold more assets and more things on their books, so when you go into a downturn like we're currently in, that they'll be shored up and okay, and to hell with you. You know, as long as they're good, it's all we really worry about, and not have to get the Fed involved with some sort of a big giant bailout. Now, why are they having to have the Fed come in and provide a safety net? Well, gee, I don't know. Maybe because Donald Trump pretty much let them do whatever they want, and then they dug themselves into a hole and blew the whole thing up, and pretty much a repeat of 2008 all over again. And so now the Fed's trying to figure out a way so it doesn't happen all over again. Gold's an asset for a bank, which would explain one of the reasons the large gold inflows, has the things they can hold for collateral. And it goes on to talk about how it's risk management for after 08, because here we are about ready to have it happen again, rather than a framework for addressing global security. Address is required to hold more capital to absorb losses. There you go. So in other words, they cannot could raise the costs, including agriculture. That's probably going to be one of the things that's hardest hit out of this. Are you guys aware that there's a Social Security pay-in cap? Well, there's also a pay-out cap as well, but there's a pay-in cap. And for 2026, it's $184,500. And it goes up every year with the cost of living adjustment index. So if you make $500,000 a year, then you pay in the exact same amount as the guy making the $184,500. Social Security is a giant Ponzi scheme. What that basically means is the people that are paying into it now do not pay as much into it proportionally as in years prior. So if you pay in and then you take out, you get pretty good. That takes more people paying in as you pay out because they keep robbing the thing. And now they're saying that benefits could be cut by 23% in 2033 without legislative action. Well, there you go. They've robbed the whole thing out, and the millennials and younger generations are not paying anything into it. Well, if you want to fix that in a big hurry, take that pay-in cap off, but keep the pay-out cap in place. So if you're making $1.2 million a year, you pay a shit ton more, but what you can take back out, it's a shit ton less. Yeah, is that totally just fucking the rich people over? Yeah, it is, but so be it. And for that fact, do people like Warren Buffett really even need Social Security? I don't know. It's up for debate. You guys can let me know your thoughts on the Social Security Administration in the comments below. I want to shift gears here in the video and talk about the illegal hiring process and some of the stuff's going on with this ICE. It's all over the news right now. In my opinion, it's political theater. So when I had employees on the farm, or we had them in the excavation industry, we did what was called an I-9 background form. It's what all employers that have employees are supposed to do. You give them an I-9 form, give your employee an I-9 form, which is an employment eligibility verification. Basically, it says whether you're legal or illegal. I-9 form, and this is the form. You can print it right off the internet. And there's sections of this form that you, the employer, do, and there's sections of it that the employee does. If you're from Iowa, you probably remember a pretty famous story of a girl named Molly Tibbetts, who was from a little tiny town of Brooklyn, Iowa, which is over on the main Interstate 80 that goes through central Iowa. Molly Tibbetts was later found to be killed, and the killer was later to be discovered as an illegal that had been working for I think it was a dairy farm, not too far off of the little town. So it's a little town, probably dairy farm is located on the edge of town. Way I take it, the guy kind of got infatuated with her or saw her or something, and ended up killing her. But what I'd like to talk about is the immigration status on that particular person. So this is Wikipedia going to immigration status. A spokesman on the behalf of the U.S. Labor and Immigration Services said its systems did not indicate that Rivera, that's the guy who killed Molly, has any lawful immigration status. Later, the U.S. Immigration and Customs informers confirmed and determined by saying law enforcement remains absolutely confident that we've correctly identified the suspect as an illegal alien from Mexico. Oh, no shit, huh? Based on both investigative interviews and his records. Rivera worked at Yarrabee Farms, owned by the family of a prominent Iowa Republican leader, Craig Lang. As part of his employment, the Lang family allowed Rivera to live rent-free on their land. This looked like they had a little man camp for some of these other illegals. Probably got multiple of them if there's a dairy. But Yarrabee Farms initially claimed that they had vetted Rivera's immigration status through the federal e-verification program. After the e-verification indicated that Yarrabee Farms was not subscribed to this program, Yarrabee Farms said the Social Security Administration system and the clarified Rivera had been given false information.
Not who he said he was. And just within the last 4 hours, we have come to learn that the Social Security Administration Employment Verification Service is not the same as E-Verify. Our family member who handles the verification process believed the systems were the same. They are not the same systems. And we apologize for any confusion this caused with our earlier statement.
So when you hire somebody, you have them fill out that I-9 form, and you're supposed to take it over to the E-Verified website and plug in the information. And it literally says right on the form to just keep the form in your file cabinet. Here is the E-Verify website, E-Verify and Form I-9. Form I-9 is mandatory, does not require a social security number, does not require a photo identification of documents, must be used to verify expired employment authorization. For an employer, what do you do with your I-9 form? Examine and verify it. Physically examine and verify. Yeah, okay. Physically examine means take a look and see if you filled it in. Complete section 2. Fill out your information and sign it. Make copies. Optional, but probably recommended. But, you don't have to. Retain the form. Keep the completed form I-9 and any copies of documents required for the time 3 years from after the hire date or 1 year after the employee ends, whichever is longer. Secure storage. Store the papers separately from personal files, a secure filing system. In other words, throw it in your file cabinet. Present it for inspection to DHS, DOL, DOJ upon request. So if they come in and they raid you, you can yank it out of your file cabinet. But never mail your forms in to the government. Never mail any of it in. And right here on the form instruction list, right off of the form, literally right off the form's website, leave a field blank if it does not apply. Sections are appropriate. Retain a copy of the forms, in other words, in your file cabinet. You're not required to retain or store the pages containing a list of acceptable terms or documents. Do not mail completed forms to the U.S. Citizenship or Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE. In other words, they don't want to hear about it, know about it, or have anything to do with it. E-Verify wouldn't have prevented Molly Tibbetts' murder because E-Verified is just based on Social Security databases, and the guy who killed Molly Tibbetts was submitted under the name of John Budd with an out-of-state driver's license and Social Security that matched his employer, Yerby Farms. So in other words, if you haven't been following along, in other words, the guy was here illegally, acquired fake information, or maybe somebody that died's information. It's proven that the fake information would have matched with the name of Social Security provided by John Budd, which was actually Rivera. And you can go into multiple articles online proving that the e-verification system doesn't really even work. It's got multiple errors in it, including the fact that they are illegal and maybe they've stolen the identification, and it still passes the background. Now, I have a big question. This is a federal income withholding. Just an employer does it, just the workbook, so you can go in here to your tables, what the person makes, and you can pull out your taxes and send it into the federal government, as well as Social Security and Medicaid. So if this John Budd was illegal, and this company, this farm, was sending in the taxes legally, where'd all that tax money go? Huh. So where's this E-Verify getting its information? What database? Oh, I see right here. It's connected to the Department of Homeland Security, which was George Bush program. But when you go look up George Bush, including his hot mic moments saying that he was urging to compromise on immigration, almost like he wanted them here, and had all sorts of things he passed to make sure that there was plenty of them here. So it's almost like that I-9 thing was designed to be an absolute joke that was never supposed to work. Interesting. And ironically, it still never gets changed. So if you quote-unquote check out your employee, then throw it in the filing cabinet like you're instructed to do, then when things go wrong later, you're under a good faith clause to allow you off the hook. You hear news on this channel that you don't find anywhere else. And one of the reasons for that is because news has become entertainment based. Why did it become entertainment based? Well, things like President Clinton signing the Telecommunications Act in 1996 was about the time the internet really came in, and they figured that it would be very hard to regulate the internet on a private case-by-case basis, so they basically just deregulated everything. Another case would be when the Fairness Doctrine from 1949 to 1987. The Fairness Doctrine was a Federal Trade Commission's policy and purpose that basically gave all political sides and angles the exact same amount of time, effort, questions, etc., until it was repealed by Ronald Reagan. When the Telecommunications Act was opened up, it basically, the internet just became wide open. News became opinion-based, and opinions often align with people's thought processes because most people are working more hours than they've ever worked before. That's why worker productivity indexes are maxed out, so they don't have time to do research and do the things that I put into these videos. I mean, these take a lot of time to put all this together, but that trickles down to how people thought processes are, and that's how you get populism. That's how you get politicians that promise them the world. So when times get tough and you turn on your news and, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's what caused all of our problems. Yeah, that's it. Well, the truth is, it's just people that have no clue what they're even talking about, and they absolutely are completely ignorant on subjects, but at the same time, they're going to fight or dig in their heels for what they think aligns with what their personalities are, their thoughts and opinions are. And that's what they'll go with till the very bitter end as the world around them continues to crumble and they don't really understand why. So, with this information being said, thanks for watching. We'll have more on the next video.